This is What Does a PhD Autofill? So first up, what is a PhD? Well, a PhD is just one big long research project. Generally, the research takes 3 to 4 years and you're focusing in on one topic and trying to answer a few different questions related to that topic and push the boundary of human knowledge to discover new things. What does PhD stand for? Well, PhD stands for a doctorate in philosophy. That is because PhDs students or PhD graduates are expected to be quite philosophical in the approach to their research and in interpreting their research. So how long does a PhD take? Well, that depends a little bit on where you're doing a PhD or the program. Generally, it involves 3 to 4 years of research, but it might also involve in the beginning a rotation to different lab groups or doing some studying and some lectures and exams before starting your research. It depends on the country and the program. Why does a PhD take so long? It's a very good question. I wish it didn't take so long, but the answer is it takes time to discover new things. So if you're based in the sciences and you're having to do experiments, those experiments take time. If you're trying to analyze literature, that takes time. And thinking, one of the hardest things a human can do, takes a lot of time too. How much does a PhD cost? Well, there are a few different costs involved in a PhD. So you have to pay your fees to the university. You have to pay your own living expenses because a PhD is a full-time job. And you've got to pay for any consumables or equipment you need to carry out your research. So how is a PhD funded? Well, for most people, you will get some form of scholarship, either directly through the supervisor who hires you, or you will apply and get your own scholarship, which should cover your fees. It should cover some living stipend for you to live off of and pay maybe a little bit of consumables budget for you to get some equipment or to get some reagents to do experiments. So how do you apply for a PhD? Again, this depends a little bit on the institute or the program, but generally you want to contact a supervisor who is researching something that you are interested in and let them know that you would be interested in pursuing a PhD. You might need to give a CV or a motivation letter, and if the supervisor has funding themselves, they might be able to offer you a funded position, or you might have to write an application together for a scholarship, or in some research institutes, you've got to apply to the institute directly before applying to particular supervisors. So what are the requirements for doing a PhD? This depends again a little bit based on country. So in a country where you do a 4-year undergraduate degree, generally you don't need a master's before doing a PhD. You can go straight from undergraduate into a PhD. But if you're in a country where it's normal to do a 3-year undergraduate degree, normally they're also looking for you to have a master's degree before entering into a PhD. Now that could be a taught master's where you did lectures and exams, or that could be a research master's where you did a little research project before commencing your PhD. So who should do a PhD? Well, the main traits you need to do a PhD is you need to be curious and you need to be resilient. So if you've got something you're curious about, you're interested, you would like to acquire new knowledge on, you would like to push the boundary of human knowledge on, and you're willing to be resilient and hardworking to see that project through, then a PhD is for you. What should I do my PhD on? Well, I obviously can't tell you what you should do your PhD on, but it should be on something you're interested in. This is going to be like your baby. You are going to have to work on it for a number of years. So you want it to be a topic or a question that motivates you. It doesn't have to be the perfect decision for you, right? Most people who are curious into a lot of things, but it should be at least something you are curious in. And if you want to, you can always change field after a PhD and pursue other interesting questions then. Where should I do my PhD? Well, you should do your PhD in a research group that aligns with your research interests. It would be ideal if that group is based in an institute or a university that is well funded. It is also generally seen as a good thing in academia to move around a little bit on your CV. So if you've already done your undergraduate and master's in one institute, I would be thinking about a different institute for your PhD. You can do 2 consecutive steps on the academic ladder together, but never do 3. That's not really seen as good for your personal development. Why should I do a PhD? Well, you should do a PhD because you're curious and you're interested in science or research and you want to push the boundary of human knowledge, and you want to make a contribution to society in that field. How hard is a PhD? Well, that depends a little bit. It's different to undergraduate studies. You're not having to learn a bunch of information and do exams, but what you are having to do is be resilient and work hard on one topic for a very long time, and be creative and be willing to try new things and be willing to pivot when things will inevitably fail, particularly if you're in the sciences. Experiments will fail. But as long as you're resilient and curious, I don't think a PhD is that hard. I actually think it's easier than sitting exams. So what is the difference between a PhD and a master's? Well, there are two kinds of master programs you can do. One is a taught master's, which is very similar to an undergraduate degree, where you will go into lectures, you will have to learn material and then regurgitate that material in an exam. And then a research master's is basically a mini PhD. So you research a small topic for a year or two, you have to write up a thesis and defend it at the end, just like a PhD, but it's about half the time of a PhD. What jobs do you need a PhD for? Well, if you want to go on the traditional academic route and you would like to end up being a lecturer or professor, in many fields you will need a PhD for this. Particularly in the sciences, in a big university, you would need a PhD to get a lectureship position. If you want to become the head of a research group, you need a PhD as well, and you will need even further research beyond that. Apart from that, there might be some research and development roles in industry that are looking for people with PhDs, that are looking for people with experience in research, though often in private companies you can also work your way up to those positions too. So what do you do after a PhD? Well, that depends on where you would like to go with your life. You could go down the traditional academic route of doing postdoctoral research, so that's doing more research in other research groups, and then look at becoming your own head of your own research group by applying for starting grants. And then if you acquire a starting grant, a university will generally give you a permanent position and make you into a lecturer, and then you will become a mentor for other students and you can work your way up to professor. That's the traditional academic research route. You could also skip some of that and go straight into a teaching lectureship position where your experiences in research is less important. Universities would be more interested in what are your communication skills, what are your teaching skills. Or you could go into something adjacent in industry related to your research. In the humanities, you might be looking at moving to a charity or a not-for-profit. Or in the sciences, you might think about moving to the R&D sector of some sort of science or engineering company. Or you could also do nothing related to your PhD whatsoever and just do the PhD for the fun of it. Finally, how many people have a PhD? Well, less than 2% of people in the world have a PhD. So, if nothing else, doing a PhD will make you special. That's what I tell myself every Monday morning. Thank you. That was What Does a PhD Autofill? Don't forget to like and subscribe.